My sister dumped her baby on me, then demanded her back when it was convenient, so I made sure the court knew why she really left. My sister Rachel was allowed to do things crazy even for her golden child status. She'd skip school to party and underage drink, and our parents would write her excuse notes. She'd steal money from my college fund, and they'd say she needed it more. But then, she got pregnant at 18 by some random guy at a house party, and out of nowhere, they told her no. She wanted to give it up, but my parents refused to let her consider it because family takes care of family. The problem was, Rachel had zero interest in taking care of anyone but herself. After Lynn was born, she'd leave her screaming in the bassinet while she talked on the phone for hours. She'd forget to feed her, then get annoyed when Lynn cried from hunger. I'd come home from my college classes to find Lynn sitting in dirty diapers because Rachel couldn't be bothered to change her. The night everything changed, Rachel left 3-month-old Lynn alone in the apartment for 8 hours to go clubbing. I only found out because the landlord called me about the non-stop crying. I broke down the door and found Lynn dehydrated and hoarse from screaming. Rachel stumbled home at 4 in the morning reeking of alcohol, and when I confronted her, she actually rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. That's when I filed for emergency custody. Rachel showed up to court in a crop top and told the judge she was too young for this responsibility anyway. She signed over her rights without even reading the papers. For 6 years, I raised Lynn as my daughter. I dropped out of college to work full-time and learned to function on 3 hours of sleep. But watching Lynn grow from a neglected baby into this confident little girl who loved science experiments made every sacrifice worth it. Then Rachel got engaged to some investment banker named Marcus. Suddenly, she wanted Lynn back. She hired an expensive lawyer claiming I'd stolen her daughter and that she'd been suffering from postpartum depression. My legal aid attorney said things didn't look good because courts favor biological parents, and Rachel now had money and a big house while I was single in a small apartment. That's when I remembered the pregnancy journal our mom had given Rachel that might still be in our parents' basement. I found it in a box of her old things, and what I read made my hands shake. Page after page of Rachel writing about how much she hated being pregnant, how the baby was ruining her body and her social life. The worst entry was from the day before she gave birth, where she wrote, "I can't wait to get this thing out of me and give it to someone else to deal with." But the real jackpot was a letter tucked in the back. Rachel had written it to a friend detailing her plan to dump the baby on me because I was desperate and pathetic enough to want it. She literally wrote that she was counting down the days until she could sign over custody and get back to having fun. The letter was dated 2 weeks after Lynn was born, when Rachel was supposedly suffering from postpartum depression. I made copies of everything and gave them to my lawyer. She said this changed everything because it proved Rachel had planned to abandon Lynn from the beginning. We also subpoenaed Rachel's phone records from that time, which showed her partying and dating while claiming to be depressed. Her location data proved she was at clubs and hotels when she said she was home crying. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and Rachel showed up in a conservative dress trying to look maternal. Marcus sat behind her in his expensive suit looking supportive. Rachel's lawyer painted her as a young mother who'd made mistakes but deserved a second chance. He brought in a therapist who'd met Rachel twice to testify about her delayed postpartum depression and how she'd been unable to make rational decisions. Then my lawyer presented our evidence. She read excerpts from the pregnancy journal where Rachel called Lynn a parasite and said she couldn't wait to be free. The judge's face changed as she heard Rachel's own words about how she planned to abandon her baby. The phone records were the final nail. My lawyer showed that during the 3 months Rachel claimed to be depressed and unable to care for Lynn, she'd been actively dating multiple men and going out 4 nights a week. Rachel tried to claim the journal entries were just venting and didn't reflect her true feelings, but the judge wasn't buying it. She asked Rachel directly why she'd written such detailed plans about abandoning Lynn. Rachel stammered. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable as more evidence came out about Rachel's real motivations. The judge continued pressing Rachel about her journal entries, while Marcus shifted uncomfortably behind her. Rachel's lawyer tried to object, but the judge overruled him, wanting to hear Rachel's explanation. Rachel broke down crying, her shoulders shaking as she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The tears seemed forced though, especially when she peeked through her fingers to check if the judge was watching. She claimed she was young and scared, that the journal entries were just her way of venting during a difficult time. The judge then asked about the 8-hour abandonment incident. Rachel straightened in her chair and tried to minimize it, insisting she'd only been gone for 2 hours at most. She said I was exaggerating to make her look bad. That's when my lawyer called Dr. Nathaniel Peterson, Lynn's old pediatrician, to the stand. He pulled out his medical records from that night and the next morning. His testimony was devastating. He described Lynn's severe dehydration, the angry diaper rash that had developed from sitting in waste for hours, and how her voice was completely gone from crying. The timestamps on his examination notes showed Lynn had been alone far longer than 2 hours, directly contradicting Rachel's timeline. Rachel's facade started cracking. When her lawyer leaned over to whisper something, she actually snapped at him loud enough for everyone to hear. "I know what I'm doing," she hissed, pushing his hand away from her arm. Marcus began whispering urgently to Rachel, his face growing paler with each revelation. I could see him gripping the bench, his knuckles white. This was clearly the first time he was hearing the real story. The judge called a 15-minute recess. I headed to the bathroom to splash water on my face, trying to calm my nerves. The door burst open and Rachel cornered me by the sinks. "Drop this right now," she snarled, her perfectly applied makeup cracking around the edges. "You have no idea what I can do to you. I'll make your pathetic little life absolute hell if you don't give me my daughter back." I stood firm, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "She's not your daughter anymore. You made that choice 6 years ago." Rachel grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging deep enough to leave marks. The bailiff must have followed her because he immediately intervened, pulling her away and warning her about appropriate courtroom behavior. Back in court, Rachel's lawyer tried a new strategy. He claimed I'd manipulated Rachel into signing over custody while she was vulnerable and suffering from postpartum depression. He called a surprise witness, Brittany Chen, who he said was Rachel's old friend. Brittany took the stand looking nervous. She testified that she'd witnessed me pressuring Rachel to give up Lynn, that I'd taken advantage of her fragile mental state. Her story sounded rehearsed, each detail too perfect. But on cross-examination, my lawyer asked Brittany one simple question about compensation for her testimony. Brittany's face went red. After some pressing, she admitted Rachel had paid her $5,000. She actually pulled out her phone and showed the bank transfer, dated just 3 days ago. The memo line read, "Consultation fee. The judge was visibly angry about the bribery attempt. Her face turned stern as she made notes, shaking her head. Rachel suddenly stood up and announced she wanted to fire her lawyer, right there, in the middle of the hearing. The courtroom erupted in chaos as her lawyer tried to calm her down. The judge banged her gavel, and Rachel kept insisting she could represent herself. Marcus stood up during the commotion. "Your Honor, I need to speak with my fiancé privately. This isn't what I was told." The judge granted another recess. Rachel and Marcus disappeared into a conference room. Through the small window in the door, I could see animated gestures and Rachel's face getting redder. 20 minutes later, they emerged separately. Marcus walked straight out of the courtroom without looking back. Rachel returned alone, her confident demeanor completely shattered. She'd lost her financial backing. Desperate now, Rachel made one last play. She pulled out printed text messages where Lynn had said she didn't want to see her birth mom. "She's poisoning my daughter against me," Rachel cried, waving the papers. My lawyer calmly revealed the context of those messages. They were sent after Rachel had shown up hammered at Lynn's school, trying to take her without permission. The incident had traumatized Lynn so badly she'd hidden under her desk. The school principal, Victoria Hendricks, was called to testify. She described how Rachel had arrived intoxicated during lunch period, screaming at staff and demanding they release her baby. When they refused and asked her to leave, she'd tried to physically push past security to get to Lynn's classroom. Lynn had been terrified, crying and hiding while Rachel banged on the classroom door. The security footage was played next. The courtroom watched in silence as Rachel stumbled through the school hallway, shouting and trying to shove past the principal. You could hear her slurred words claiming everyone was keeping her baby from her. The timestamp showed this was during school hours, with children visible in the background looking scared. The judge had seen enough. She not only denied Rachel's custody petition, but issued a restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of Lynn or me. She also ordered the prosecutor's office to investigate charges for attempted bribery of a witness and filing false reports to the court. As we prepared to leave, Rachel tried one final manipulation. She dropped to her knees in front of Lynn in the courthouse hallway. "Baby, I'm your real mommy," she said, tears streaming down her face. "She stole you from me. Don't you want to come live with mommy in a big house with your own pool?" Lynn looked at Rachel with a calmness beyond her 6 years. She took my hand and squeezed it before speaking. "I know who my real mom is," Lynn said clearly. "She's the one who reads me stories every night and takes care of me when I'm sick. She's the one who taught me to tie my shoes and helps with my homework, not the one who left me alone when I was a baby." Rachel's face crumpled completely. For the first time, I saw genuine emotion there, the realization that she'd lost everything through her own choices. Lynn and I walked out of the courthouse together, hand in hand. Through the glass doors, I could see Rachel still standing on the steps, her designer dress wrinkled, her elaborate scheme in complete ruins. She looked smaller somehow, deflated without her lies to prop her up. The courthouse steps were still warm from the afternoon sun when my phone started buzzing. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from my father, and a string of texts that all said variations of "call me now." I knew Rachel had gotten to them first. Lynn tugged on my hand as we reached the parking lot. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. Her resilience amazed me. She'd just faced down the woman who'd abandoned her, and all she wanted was mint chocolate chip. "Of course, sweetheart. Let me just check these messages first." I scrolled through the texts, my stomach sinking with each one. The last message from my mother simply said, "How could you do this to your sister?" At the ice cream shop, Lynn chatted happily about her upcoming science fair project, while I tried to push away the growing dread. My parents had always taken Rachel's side, but I'd hoped that maybe this time, faced with actual evidence of neglect, they might finally see the truth. That hope died when we got home. My father's car was parked outside our apartment building, and both my parents were waiting by the entrance. My mother's face was blotchy from crying, and my father looked angrier than I'd ever seen him. "Lynn, why don't you go upstairs and start on your homework?" I suggested, keeping my voice light. "I'll be up in a few minutes." She looked between me and my parents, her little face worried. "Are you in trouble?" "No, baby. Just need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa for a bit." I handed her my keys and watched her disappear into the building before turning to face my parents. "You destroyed her," my mother said immediately, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Rachel called us sobbing. She said you bribed people to lie about her in court. How could you be so cruel?" "I didn't bribe anyone, Mom. Rachel did." The judge saw right through her lies. I kept my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "She abandoned Lynn for 8 hours when she was 3 months old. The pediatrician testified about how dehydrated—" "Stop it!" My father's voice boomed across the parking lot. "We didn't raise you to be vindictive. Your sister made mistakes, yes, but she was young and scared. You should have helped her, not stolen her baby." The familiar frustration bubbled up. "I didn't steal anyone. Rachel signed over custody willingly. She told the judge she was too young for the responsibility. Because you manipulated her when she was vulnerable." My mother grabbed my arm, much like Rachel had earlier. She had postpartum depression. She wasn't thinking clearly. I pulled away, the nail marks from Rachel still stinging. She was thinking clearly enough to go clubbing 4 nights a week, clearly enough to date multiple men and plan the whole thing in her journal. "Those were private thoughts," my father said. "You had no right to use them against her. Family doesn't do that to family." The irony almost made me laugh. Family doesn't abandon babies either. But here we are. My mother's face hardened. "You've always been jealous of Rachel, always trying to make her look bad because you couldn't stand that she was prettier, more popular, more loved." The words hit like physical blows, confirming what I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe. Even now, even after everything, I was still the lesser daughter in their eyes. "I need to go," I said quietly. "Lynn needs dinner." "This isn't over," my father warned. "We're going to help Rachel appeal this ridiculous ruling. That little girl belongs with her real mother." I turned at the building entrance. Her real mother is the one who's been there every day for 6 years, not the one who saw saw her as an inconvenience. Inside, I found Lynn at the kitchen table, her homework spread out but untouched. She looked up when I entered and I could see she'd been crying. "They think I should live with Rachel, don't they?" she asked in a small voice. I sat down beside her, pulling her into a hug. "What matters is what the judge decided. You're staying right here with me. But what if she tries again? What if Grandma and Grandpa help her?" I wished I could promise her it was over, but I'd learned long ago not to lie to her. "Then we'll face it together, just like we always do." The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy that felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. I went to work at the dental office, picked Lynn up from school, helped with homework, made dinner. But underneath the routine, I was waiting for the next attack. It came on Thursday. My boss, Dr. Martinez, called me into his office looking uncomfortable. He'd always been supportive, especially when I'd needed flexible hours for Lynn, so his expression made my stomach drop. "I got a call yesterday," he began, not meeting my eyes. "Someone claiming to be from Child Protective Services, asking about your work attendance and whether you'd ever seemed unstable." My blood ran cold. That wasn't CPS. That was probably my sister or someone she hired. I figured as much when they couldn't provide proper credentials. He finally looked at me. But then I got another call from someone saying they were a concerned patient. They said you'd been stealing from the practice to support a custody battle. "Dr. Martinez, I would never—" "I know," he held up a hand. "I know you wouldn't. But I also got 3 more calls today with similar accusations. Someone is trying very hard to make you look bad." My hands clenched in my lap. "My sister lost a custody hearing on Monday. She's trying to build a case for appeal. I'm sorry you're dealing with this." His expression was sympathetic but worried. "I trust you completely, but if these calls continue, other patients might start to believe the rumors. I can't afford to lose business." The implication hung heavy between us. My job, the stability I'd worked so hard to maintain for Lynn, was now at risk because of Rachel's campaign. "I understand," I said quietly. "I'll try to handle this quickly." That evening, I was making Lynn's favorite spaghetti when someone knocked on the door. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a suit holding a clipboard. "Can I help you?" I called through the door. "I'm from Child Protective Services," she announced. "We've received a complaint about the welfare of a minor in this residence." My heart pounded, but I forced myself to think clearly. "Can I see your identification, please?" She held up her badge to the peephole. It looked legitimate. I opened the door but kept the chain on. "What kind of complaint?" I asked. "Allegations of neglect and emotional abuse," she said, consulting her clipboard. "I'll need to inspect the home and speak with the child." I knew I couldn't refuse without looking guilty, so I let her in. Lynn looked up from her homework, eyes wide. "Hi there," the social worker said gently. "I'm Ms. Patterson. What's your name?" "Lynn," she whispered, scooting closer to me. "I just need to ask you some questions and look around a bit, okay? Nothing to be scared about." The inspection felt invasive but necessary. Ms. Patterson checked our food supply, examined Lynn's room, looked for safety hazards. She asked Lynn about her daily routine, whether she felt safe, if she had everything she needed. Lynn answered clearly, though I could see her hands trembling. "Who made this complaint?" I asked as Ms. Patterson made notes. "I can't disclose that, but I can tell you it came from a family member concerned about the child's living situation." She looked up from her clipboard. "They specifically mentioned concerns about your mental stability and ability to provide proper care. My sister lost custody of Lynn on Monday," I explained. "This is retaliation." Mr. Patterson nodded slowly. "I'll note that in my report. From what I can see, Lynn is well cared for, and the home is appropriate, but I am required to follow up on all complaints, so there may be additional visits." After she left, Lynn burst into tears. "Why won't Rachel leave us alone?" I held her tight, my own eyes burning, because some people can't accept when they've lost. The harassment escalated over the next week. My landlord received an anonymous letter claiming I was running an illegal daycare from my apartment. My car tires were slashed while I was at work. No proof it was Rachel, of course. Lynn's school got multiple calls about my mental instability and dangerous behavior. The principal, Mrs. Hendricks, who'd testified at the hearing, called me in for a meeting. "I know what's happening," she said immediately. "After what I witnessed with Rachel at the school, I don't believe a word of these accusations. But other parents are starting to ask questions. She's trying to destroy my life so she can claim I'm unfit," I said, exhaustion weighing down every word. "I've documented every call, every accusation," Mrs. Hendricks assured me. "If this goes back to court, I'll testify again about what's really happening here." But the damage was spreading. Some parents had started avoiding me at pickup, whispering when I walked by. One mother actually pulled her daughter away when Lynn tried to invite her for a playdate. The breaking point came 2 weeks after the hearing. I'd just gotten Lynn to bed when someone pounded on the door. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers. "We've had a report of a domestic disturbance at this address," one officer said when I opened the door. "Neighbors supposedly heard screaming and a child crying." "That's impossible," I said, my voice shaking. "Lynn's been asleep for an hour. No one was screaming." They insisted on checking, though they were apologetic about it. Lynn woke up terrified to find police officers in her room. After they confirmed there was no disturbance and left, she couldn't go back to sleep. "I hate her," Lynn said, curled against me on the couch. "I hate Rachel for doing this to us." "Don't let hate eat you up, baby," I said, though I was struggling with my own anger. "That's what she wants." The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't keep playing defense while Rachel destroyed our lives piece by piece. I called my lawyer and told her about everything that had been happening. "Document everything," she advised. "Every incident, every call, every accusation. We can file harassment charges, but we need proof it's her." "How do I prove it when she's careful not to leave her fingerprints on anything?" "Keep documenting. She'll slip up eventually. They always do." But I couldn't just wait for Rachel to make a mistake while she systematically dismantled our lives. I needed to be proactive. I installed security cameras outside our apartment door. I started recording every phone call. I kept a detailed log of every incident. The universe seemed to reward my preparation. 3 days later, my security camera caught something interesting. At 2 a.m., a figure approached our door and slipped something underneath. The person was wearing a hoodie, but when they turned to leave, the camera caught their profile. It was Brittany Chen, the woman who'd lied on the stand for $5,000. I retrieved the paper, another threatening note about how I'd pay for stealing Rachel's baby. But now I had video evidence of who was delivering these messages. I called the police and filed a report. With the video evidence, they took took it seriously. Brittany was brought in for questioning and quickly cracked. She admitted Rachel had hired her not just for the false testimony, but to help with the harassment campaign. She'd been making the calls to my work, to Lynn's school, to CPS. Rachel promised me another $5,000, Brittany told the police, according to what my lawyer later shared. She said her ex-fiancé left her with nothing and her parents' money was tied up, but she'd pay me as soon as she got Lynn back and could access the child support. Child support, of course. I'd never pursued it because I'd never needed Rachel's money, but apparently Marcus had done the math on what 6 years of back support would total, and it was substantial enough to end an engagement over. The police arrested Brittany for harassment and filing false reports. She agreed to testify against Rachel in exchange for a lighter sentence, but when they went to arrest Rachel, she was gone. Her apartment was empty, cleaned out in a hurry. My parents called that night, hysterical. "What did you do?" my mother screamed. "The police came here looking for Rachel. They said she's wanted for conspiracy and harassment. She's been terrorizing us for weeks, Mom," I said tiredly, making false reports, trying to get me fired, sending the police to our home. "You're lying," but her voice wavered. "Rachel wouldn't. She said she was going to fight for her daughter legally. By destroying my life so I'd look unfit? That's not legal, Mom. That's criminal." My father took the phone. "Where is she?" "I don't know. The police said her apartment was empty. If you've driven her into hiding, if something happens to her," his voice was thick with threat and grief. "The only person responsible for Rachel's choices is Rachel," I said, just like always. I hung up on his response. For 3 days, there was an eerie quiet. No threatening calls, no surprise visits from authorities, no slashed tires. Lynn started to relax, even smiled again at school. I allowed myself to hope that maybe Rachel had finally given up. Then my lawyer called. "Rachel's been arrested," she said. "She was hiding at a friend's house 2 towns over. But there's something else." During the arrest, they found evidence she'd been planning something bigger. Bigger how? She had Lynn's school schedule, photos of your daily routine, and had been researching family law in other states. The police think she was planning to take Lynn and run. My knees went weak. I sank onto the couch, phone pressed to my ear. Kidnapping? That's what they're charging her with, along with conspiracy, harassment, and witness tampering from the original hearing. My lawyer's voice was grim but satisfied. "She's being held without bail as a flight risk. What about Lynn? Is she safe? The restraining order is still in effect, and now it's backed by criminal charges. Rachel won't be coming near either of you for a very long time." I should have felt relieved, but all I felt was sad. Sad that it had come to this. That my sister had chosen to destroy herself rather than accept responsibility for her choices. Sad that my parents would probably never forgive me for being the one to finally hold Rachel accountable. That evening I sat Lynn down and explained in simple terms what had happened. Rachel had been doing bad things and now had to face consequences, just like when kids at school broke rules. "Is she going to jail?" Lynn asked. "Maybe," I said honestly. "The judge will decide." "I don't want her to go to jail," Lynn said quietly. "I just want her to leave us alone." "I know, baby. Me too." But Rachel had made her choices, just like she'd made the choice to abandon Lynn 6 years ago. And for the first time in my life, she was going to face real consequences without our parents or anyone else cushioning the fall. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "You ruined my life." Rachel's voice was flat, empty of its usual dramatic flair. She was calling from jail. "I hope you're happy." "I didn't ruin anything, Rachel. You did that all by yourself." "I'm your sister," she said, and for once she sounded genuinely broken. "How could you do this to your own sister? How could you abandon your own daughter?" I countered. "How could you terrorize a 6-year-old who never did anything but exist?" Silence stretched between us. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, she said, "I never wanted her." "I know," I said simply, "but I did. I've wanted her every single day for 6 years, and that's why she's my daughter, not yours." Rachel hung up without another word. It was the last time we'd speak for a very long time. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. I arranged for Lynn to stay with a trusted neighbor during school hours, explaining that I had important meetings. The woman who'd been watching Lynn during emergencies for years agreed immediately, having witnessed some of Rachel's harassment firsthand. That morning, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit and arrived at the courthouse early. My lawyer met me outside, carrying a thick folder of documentation we'd compiled over the past weeks. "Rachel's facing serious charges," she explained as we walked through security. "Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, witness tampering, harassment, and filing false reports." The prosecutor seems confident. The courtroom was smaller than the one from the custody hearing. Rachel sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. Her court-appointed attorney whispered urgently in her ear. My parents sat in the gallery's front row. My mother clutched my father's arm, shooting daggers at me when I entered. I took a seat on the opposite side, focusing on the proceedings rather than their hostility. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. She presented Brittany Chen's testimony about the harassment campaign, the security footage of the note being delivered, phone records showing coordinated calls to my workplace and Lynn's school. Each piece of evidence built a clear picture of Rachel's escalating behavior. When they played the security footage from Lynn's school showing Rachel hammered and aggressive, my mother gasped audibly. My father's face went pale. They'd clearly never seen this evidence before. The prosecutor then revealed something new. During Rachel's arrest, they'd found a notebook detailing her plans. She'd researched custody laws in states with more favorable biological parent rights. She'd looked up Lynn's school schedule, mapped out routes to avoid main highways, even researched how to obtain false identification documents. The defendant wasn't just harassing the victim, the prosecutor stated. She was actively planning to abduct the child and flee the jurisdiction. Rachel's attorney tried to argue that these were just desperate thoughts of a grieving mother, not actual plans, but the prosecutor countered with Rachel's internet search history, showing she'd looked up how to disappear with a child and countries without extradition treaties. The judge set bail at $50,000, citing Rachel as a flight risk and danger to Lynn. My parents stood to leave, presumably to arrange bail, but Rachel's attorney announced they couldn't post it. Apparently my parents' assets were mostly tied up in their house and retirement accounts. Rachel would would remain in custody until trial. Outside the courthouse, my parents confronted me. My mother's face was streaked with tears. My father's jaw clenched tight. "She's your sister," my mother said, voice breaking. "How can you stand there and watch them treat her like a criminal?" "Because she is one, Mom," I replied, exhausted by the familiar refrain. "She tried to kidnap Lynn. She terrorized us for weeks. She just wanted her baby back," my father shouted, drawing stares from people passing by. "Lynn isn't a baby anymore. She's a little girl who Rachel traumatized with her behavior." I kept my voice level despite my frustration. "A little girl who hid under her desk because Rachel showed up hammered at her school." My mother flinched at that, and I saw the first crack in her blind loyalty. "That video? Was that real?" "Everything you saw in there was real. Rachel did all of it." I met both their eyes. "And you enabled her for years. This is where it led." I left them standing there and drove to pick up Lynn. She ran to me when I arrived, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Is it over?" she asked hopefully. "Not yet," I admitted, "but Rachel can't bother us anymore." The next few weeks passed in relative peace. Without Rachel's constant harassment, life settled into a normal routine. Lynn's anxiety decreased. She started sleeping through the night again, and even made a new friend at school. Dr. Martinez called me into his office on a Friday afternoon. My stomach dropped, remembering our last conversation about the harassment affecting his practice. "I wanted to apologize," he said, surprising me. "I heard about what your sister was doing. The fake calls, the false accusations. I should have been more supportive. You were protecting your practice," I said. "I understand. Still, you've been an excellent employee for 3 years. I'd like to make it up to you." He slid a paper across the desk. "I'm promoting you to office manager. It comes with a raise and better benefits." I stared at the offer, tears pricking my eyes. After everything, something good was finally happening. The trial date was set for 3 months out. Rachel's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor held firm. The evidence was too overwhelming, the charges too serious. 2 weeks before the trial, my lawyer called with unexpected news. "Rachel wants to make a deal. She'll plead guilty to the harassment charges if the prosecution drops the kidnapping conspiracy charge." "What does that mean for us?" I asked. "She'd get probation and mandatory counseling instead of prison time. The restraining order would remain in place. She'd have no contact with you or Lynn." I thought about Lynn, how she'd finally started to relax and feel safe again. "What do you recommend?" "It ends this now. No trial, no testimony, no chance of appeal. Lynn won't have to relive everything on the witness stand. That decided it. Accept the deal." The plea hearing was brief. Rachel stood before the judge and admitted to harassment and filing false reports. She agreed to 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory therapy. The restraining order was extended for 5 years. As part of the agreement, she also relinquished any future claim to custody of Lynn. My parents attended but didn't look at me. When Rachel was led away, my mother finally broke down completely. My father guided her out, his arm around her shoulders. They looked older, diminished somehow. A week later, a letter arrived from my mother. Her handwriting was shaky, the words carefully chosen. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, about the video from Lynn's school, about what the prosecutor said. I'm starting to understand that maybe we didn't help Rachel by always protecting her from consequences. Maybe we failed both of you. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I wanted you to know that." It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was a start. Lynn thrived in the months that followed. Her science fair project on plant growth won second place. She joined the school's art club and discovered a talent for painting. Every achievement felt like a victory over the chaos Rachel had tried to create. On the 6-month anniversary of the custody hearing, I was tucking Lynn into bed when she asked, "Do you think Rachel will ever try to come back?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But if she does, we'll handle it together, just like we always have." "I'm glad you're my mom," she said sleepily. "My real mom." I kissed her forehead, my heart full. "I'm glad too, baby." The next morning brought the usual rush of getting ready for school and work. I packed Lynn's lunch while she finished her breakfast, helped her find her missing library book, and braided her hair the way she liked it. As we walked to the car, hand in hand, I realized this was what victory looked like. Not dramatic courtroom moments or tearful confrontations, but quiet mornings and bedtime stories. The simple privilege of raising my daughter in peace. Rachel had tried to destroy the life we'd built, but she'd only made us stronger. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Lynn buckled herself into her booster seat and started chatting about her upcoming playdate. I smiled, started the car, and drove toward her school. Just another ordinary morning in our beautifully ordinary life.